I am banning Mr. Sterling for life.
The CEO of Mozilla, Brendan Eich,
has been forced to resign.
Forced out, banned for life, dropped by her TV network, dropped by his TV network, vilified for his word. What is okay to say? The airwaves are filled with bluster and deceit, sex and crude comments. What goes too far?
The Ching Chong Ding Dong Foundation for Sensitivity to Orientals or whatever.
The hashtag Cancel Colbert is trending.
Losing a TV show is one thing. Losing your freedom, another. This man was arrested for criticizing gays, and college students cheered. Some places your words could get you killed. What is permissible and what isn't? Is it okay to tell a man to man up? Okay to tell a woman she's bossy?
Let's ban bossy. 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 Bossy.
Things you can't say.
Are they better off as slaves?
That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
Obviously, the offensive speech story this week was what the owner of the Los Angeles Clippers said to his girlfriend. Things like, don't show the public pictures of you with black people like Magic Johnson. There was quick reaction from the mayor of Sacramento, Magic Johnson, and the head of the NBA.
There's absolutely no place in the NBA family for ignorance, intolerance.
He has to lose the team.
I am banning Mr. Sterling for life.
Bingo. Within days, he's banned by the NBA. And yet, it's a little confusing because what got him into trouble is what he said. Americans supposedly revere free speech. And yet, Donald Sterling wasn't punished by the NBA for things he did, but what he said and what he thought was a private conversation. Now, what things did he do regarding race? Well, apparently he told black people, you may not live in my apartment buildings. The government sued him for housing discrimination, claiming he refused to rent to blacks in Beverly Hills. None of that much made news. But this private conversation got him banned from basketball. What's up with that? Well, let's ask Camille Foster, co-host of The Independence. What's that about?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that you can get in so much trouble for something that you did. And the NBA is an interesting organization to take out this sort of retribution on him for something he said. The NBA is a league that notoriously has had players who've gone into the stands, punched fans in the face, choked coaches in the arena, threatening to kill them, beat on their wives in some cases. A coach newly hired who was a drunk driver.
Eyes of the public.
This is worse. Somehow. Those 7-game suspension for beating your wife. You lose half the season for punching a fan in the face, but apparently saying racist things to your girlfriend, not your spouse, in private, in the privacy of your home, is the highest crime. It is
in your opinion, they shouldn't have done?
In fairness, I think the NBA is free to do whatever they like. They are a private organization. They have their contractual obligations to the coaches, to the players. So long as it's all within those parameters, they can fire him. What I think is very strange and disconcerting is the way in which people are responding to this and the league in turn has responded to this. We seem almost to be mostly concerned with retribution here and with heaping scorn on the supposed racist. And that has something to do with this dysfunctional conversation that we've been having in this country about race for a number of years. And the dysfunction is easy to understand. We've got a dicey history on the subject.
And because people heard it, it was different. I mean, Elgin Baylor accused him of treating him as a token and sued him for employment discrimination. There were these... He wouldn't rent apartments, but somehow that was under the radar screen.
It was under the radar screen. And even the cases that were settled out of court, I mean, we don't actually know what happened in that case. But he does seem like a character that may have done some of these things. And all of those things are deplorable. The question, however, becomes... what is the most egregious thing that you can do? And what do we do with people who say things that we dislike? Do we seek to condemn them? Do we seek to end them entirely, to get them out of the public sphere? I don't know. And I'm not certain that that's a good precedent for us to set. There are people now who are actively seeking to go after the DeVosses who own the Orlando Magic because they are outspoken conservatives and they're evangelical Christians who have given money to groups who oppose gay marriage. Is that what's next? And who else's unpopular views are next? I don't support public schools. I don't support the drug war. Am I somehow saying things that are now at least politically unpopular?
But here you are on TV.
For now.
During the NBA Commissioner's press conference to announce its ban on Sterling, one reporter asked, would you now look into the personal views of other NBA owners? And the commissioner dodged the question. Mm-hmm. But it does make you wonder.
It's really disconcerting. I mean, he asked the question seemingly in all seriousness and doesn't seem to understand the Orwellian tone, or at least a pretext of that question. There's something really scary about a world in which the thought police perhaps might be dispatched to find out whether or not you are appropriately civil and have a right to work or to hold a position in this country.
From the thought police to the word police, before the Sterling hysteria this week, Camille's TV show debated a similarly sensitive topic: who can say the N-word? And Camille said it on TV.
Nigger is a word that has a tremendous amount of historical baggage attached to it, but it also has a contemporary context as well. And I think there's something really, really important about the fact that I can say it, and that all of you are so uncomfortable saying it.
But that's not so surprising. You can say it, I can't.
It's not surprising, but there is something that is maybe a little distressing about the double standard. To return to the Sterling situation quickly, Larry Johnson is a guy who played basketball for the Charlotte Hornets for years. In response to this, he says that blacks are upset about the wrong thing. We should seek to have our own league, and we should have all black teams. That's racial exclusivism. Why isn't that absurd? Why isn't that something
because
that's
you're a minority
upsetting
group that's
everyone?
Historically been oppressed.
But racial tribalism should always be abhorrent, or we at least should view it in exactly the same way.
Thank you, Camille Foster. Let's move from racism to homophobia. Homophobia was the accusation against the CEO of Mozilla, the company that makes the Firefox web browser. 6 years ago, he made a $1,000 political contribution to support a California ballot measure that defined marriage as between a man and a woman. When liberal groups found out about it, they demanded that Mozilla fire their new CEO, and he was forced to resign. Even some liberals then said that went too far. Blogger Andrew Sullivan, who's gay, said he was disgusted by what he called gay rights fanaticism. And even one of America's most intolerant leftists said this.
I think there is a gay mafia. I think if you cross them, you do get whacked. I really do.
So is there now a powerful gay mafia, and is this kind of social pressure censorship good? Yes, says Austin Peterson, who runs the website libertarian-republic.com. But columnist Roy Murdoch says no. And Austin, you first. Why is this good?
Well, I think that the good part of it is not necessarily that he had to step down, but that it should show liberals the power of the marketplace. And the problem is that so often liberals want to resort to a government solution to stamp out what they call homophobia or bigotry. And the problem here is that everyone is saying, number one, that he was fired, which he was not. He voluntarily resigned because he became a liability to his institution. So this is really a market decision. And I think that employees, you have the right of free association. If they choose not to associate with their CEO and he is a liability to their fiscal bottom line, it should show liberals that you don't need to use the government to enforce your version of morality. And if we're going to live in a civil society, that this is the way that we should enforce civil society rather than to come in and step in and say that the government needs to use force.
But didn't this, I mean, well, you say it, DeRoy.
Well, I would say it's less a matter of free markets than it is a matter of mob rule. I mean, what this man did was give $1,000 to Proposition.
We're all for free markets.
We're for free markets. I'm very much for free markets.
I think this went too far.
Yeah, went way too far. Look, back in 2008, when this ballot measure was before the California voters, Mr. Ike put $1,000, made a $1,000 contribution, and it passed 52-48. Now, this was 6 years ago. Now, these days, a lot more people are in favor of gay marriage, but back at the time, it was a much more controversial position. And after all, Barack Obama was in favor of
2 years ago.
It's just 2 years ago before he evolved and said he was for gay marriage. So maybe he ought to resign over this. Look, I think we ought to be a society where people can donate to campaigns, support ballot measures with which people may disagree, without feeling that fearing they're going to lose their jobs and basically have their careers ended.
And Ike wasn't saying I'm against gays. He said I'm committed to ensuring Mozilla is a place that includes and supports everyone, regardless of sexual orientation. He just didn't want marriage redefined.
That's right.
Mozilla then issued a press release. Our culture of openness encourages staff and community to share their beliefs and opinions in public. But then it was like they're cringing. But this time we failed to listen. We didn't move fast enough to engage with people once the controversy started. We're sorry. We must do better.
Look, I mean, it would be one thing if, in his time at Mozilla, Mr. Ike engaged in all sorts of discrimination, the kind of comments we heard from Donald Sterling. There's no evidence he did any of that. He put out these statements saying, I can only ask for your support. In the meantime, I want to express my sorrow at having caused pain. If Obama were allowed to evolve on this issue, I think at least the question should have been asked. Are you feeling different about this?
Here's the problem.
Rather than tossing the guy out and saying, you no longer can work here, go find yourself another job.
It's wrong, and this is totally disingenuous to compare the two. You're saying, what, it's okay, it's wrong if he says something homophobic, but if he does something homophobic, such as try and restrict the individual political rights of a minority, well then, he should be protected for that. And I think that you have to draw the line somewhere.
One right, the right
to freely marry. And if you believe in gay rights, such as I do, then I think that you have the right to your free speech, but you don't have the right to a job. He doesn't have the right to be the CEO of Mozilla. And so he should not be protected from the consequences of his free speech. It's very important that liberals understand there are consequences to free speech, and the marketplace can punish speech that you happen to find homophobic.
And I think what's going to happen is with these people who support gay marriage, as I do, I think a lot of people are going to have a sense of a backlash, which is, okay, look, we've been able to say gay people can serve in the military. It's okay if gay people get married, and more people believe that. But if the response is going to be, you did this 6 years ago, we're not even going to ask what your view is now. You apologized for it and said, let's be an open-minded kind of company. And the response is, get the hell out of here. I think there's going to be a backlash. A lot of people are going to say, you know what, that's enough. We don't want any more. Enough with this gay rights thing. Why don't you people get back in the closet?
What about Alec Baldwin being fired or let go by MSNBC after he called a photographer a faggot?
Great question. And here's the thing. Mozilla has a fantastic relationship with Google, one of their biggest clients. Now, MSNBC, they have to worry about their bottom line as well. And so this becomes an issue of companies being able to protect their bottom lines. If I actually have a small business, if my employees were going out making racist or homophobic statements and that was affecting my bottom line, I should be able to fire someone. Remember, Brendan Ike wasn't fired, but I should be able to fire someone if I feel like they are affecting my bottom line.
That's part of freedom. Thank you, Austin and DeRoy. Coming up, more things that make Americans say, you may not say that. And I will argue that some hate speech is a good thing. Coming up. When someone flew this anti-Jesus banner over Canada, the Canadian Human Rights Commission considered charging them with the crime of hate speech. In America, Christians might gripe, but most understand that the person who did this has a right to do it. Americans get that free speech includes religion. However, if the comments are about Islam, there is much more fear and censorship. Zuhdi Jasser's experienced some of that. He's a doctor and a devout Muslim who's been critical of what he calls Islamists in the United States. What do you mean, Islamists?
I mean, basically, like our founding fathers fought at the Church of England, but which are Muslims that believe that the state of that Islam should be part of the state law, that want to advocate Sharia, like the 56 countries of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation that spend billions to put us in the West on the defense and label devout Muslims like me as not only heretics but apostates, just because we want to have diversity, just because we disagree with them, we get called bigots. I've gotten death threats from Al-Qaeda in Syria, and the local organizations nationally, basically they're nonviolent, but they try to do the same thing, which is bully us and tell us to be quiet, go to the back of the mosque. And even though my family's built over 4 mosques in the U.S. and I love my faith, I get labeled as a bigot and anti-Islam, and the youth that work on our Liberty Project similarly get called that.
And
why?
You've written about this in your book, The Battle for the Soul of Islam, but let me push back a little. You narrated a documentary that the New York City Police Department showed its officers. Here's an excerpt.
It's an entire movement, and the idea of it is hatred for our way of life.
The document states that their work in America is a kind of a grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within. We all know about terrorism. This is the war you don't know about.
And the accusation is that you're saying that all Muslims hate our way of life.
Absolutely not. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that Islamists that believe in political Islam, like the Brotherhood in Egypt or the Khomeinists in Iran or the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia, those are the ones that hate our way of life. Many of the imams, not all of them, but many of them in this country, like Imam Awlaki and others who say America is anti-Islam, those are the Muslims that my family escaped to come here to be free. And we need to have this debate within the House of Islam. And the Islamists, through their petrodollars and influence in the State Department and our government, don't let us have that debate. They've effected blasphemy laws inside this country by making Muslims like me shut up, and they won't debate us. They want to do it from backbiting instead of frontally.
Not just the money, it's the fear of death. I take this Seattle cartoonist working for the Seattle Weekly, Molly Norris. She went into hiding because she had the gall to ask for a Draw Mohammed Day on her Facebook page. And Seattle Weekly issued a statement. You may have noticed Molly Norris' comic is not in the paper this week. There is no more Molly. The gifted cartoonist is alive and well, thankfully, but on the insistence of security specialists at the FBI, she is going ghost, moving, changing her name, essentially wiping away her identity, will no longer be publishing in our paper. That's just accepted?
Well, this is about the future of liberty, the future of American freedom, and we can't cower down in fear. We can't allow us. This is about national security against Islamism that is going to spread across this so-called Arab awakening if we don't help those who are reformists and take sides, because this is why I do this. I want my children to be part of a faith that can debate, that can confront these realities, and not infantilize Muslims that, oh no, we don't want to offend the Islamists because they'll kill us, they'll attack us. That's not American, to cower from debate and allow us to self-censor because of fear.
Thank you, Zuhdi Jasser. Coming up, is the word fiesta offensive to you? What about saying, you guys? Watch out, some Americans are offended by that. Of all the places in America, the university is supposed to be the hotbed of open discussion. You debate, test your ideas, listen to see whose argument is best, and we learn from that open debate. But now, students on many campuses are taught that some words and ideas are just beyond the pale. They do not deserve to be heard. Also, now students are told, don't even use phrases like, that's so gay, or man up. That's supposed to be offensive to gays and women. Now, these campaigns mean well. They're meant to discourage attitudes that have been used to marginalize people, and it's good to open students' eyes about that. But speech codes meant to protect people give the power of censorship to whomever is most easily and quickly offended, and that gives everyone this perverse incentive to be offended, to become more sensitive. If being easily offended gives you power over other people, some people will get offended quickly. Catherine Timpf writes about this. She's a reporter for the website Campus Reform. Students now walk on eggshells?
Definitely. Students are terrified. It's not just the typical things that you think of, oh, that's offensive. You guys is even very offensive. You're supposed to say men, women, and people that do not conform to those gender binaries. So you can't say, hey, guys, want to get some pizza. You have to say, hey, men, women, and people who don't, not the same ring to it, really.
But guys includes women. And do students laugh at this?
Some do, and some are very, very serious. When I went to a feminist conference of college students, a lot of them were upset that a speaker addressed them as you guys, saying men, women, and people that don't conform. That's incredibly long, and you guys isn't actually saying you are all guys, and I think you're all guys.
You're all people.
Yeah.
At Dartmouth, they were planning a party, a fiesta they called it. What happened?
Well, one student complained, saying that this was racist and insensitive because it did not give an accurate representation of all of Mexican culture.
She described herself as Mexican-born. I'm a woman of color, but.
Right. The thing is, these students didn't say, hey, come to our cultural history museum. They said, come to our lawn, eat burritos and chips, and let's raise money for heart patients.
Yeah, there was a charity event. They canceled it.
Yes.
Macalester College, the University Department of Multicultural Life tells students don't use the words derp, wuss, or you guys again. What's derp?
It's something that you put on a meme. Maybe someone makes a funny face. It's like duh or stupid. And they said to replace that with cognitive learning disability, which is much more offensive. They said don't say crazy, say person with a mental health condition. Crazy is like a girl who texts too many times or an uncle who yells at the TV. They're not interchangeable.
Duke, some students there, not the university at least, they have this campaign, don't use man up.
Right, man up. I want to tell these kids, just so you know, you're not actually saying be more like a man. It's an idiom. It's an idiom. They need an idiom awareness campaign.
But it's kind of saying be tougher like a man.
We're going to have people walking around saying, hey, I heard you say that Tess was easy as pie. She's a baker. You're diminishing her work and she doesn't appreciate it. That's what's up next.
So those are just campaigns, but students have been kicked off campus for saying the wrong thing. At Valdosta State University, a student was expelled because he criticized some environmental plan that the university president had.
Exactly. You can't criticize, you can't say anything, and it's totally destroying this form of open ideas and free speech that a college is supposed to be so you can learn. What good is all this focus on diversity that these campuses have if you can't actually hear what anybody has to say for real?
Now, we pick the worst examples. There have got to be universities where people feel pretty free, or is this everywhere?
This is everywhere. I've talked to students all over the country as a reporter at Campus Reform. That's what I do, and everyone's saying that there's this huge focus on we need to be careful because you can get in some serious trouble, or with the internet, people can blast you and you can get a name as a racist every time someone Googles you.
SUNY Oswego College, a journalism student was kicked off campus for asking hockey coaches about his school's coach. He said, what you say doesn't have to be positive, that's fine. He was ordered to vacate his dorm and accused of harassment, threats, and defamation against the coach.
Because he was trying to facilitate this open communication that is going to become impossible. So that's going to be happening all over the place, I think, because if you can't say you guys or man up, then I'm a little terrified that I might have said something offensive during this segment without even knowing it.
At the University of Central Florida, a professor suspended for joking about tough exam questions. Am I on a killing spree or what?
Again, he wasn't actually saying he was going to kill anybody. There are expressions. We're going to have to go through all of our idioms and totally destroy them and make them twice as long just to make sure not even one person is offended.
Thank you, Catherine. Keep watching out for this. Coming up, someone who likes to offend people. That's next. When I grew up, everyone called black people Negroes or colored people. I'm told that's offensive now, so I use the term black. But I'm confused. America's biggest civil rights organization is still called the NAACP. CP stands for colored people. And you can donate to the United Negro College Fund. So why is that okay? In 1988, Jesse Jackson said blacks should be called African Americans. Most white people immediately obeyed. But why? It's a cumbersome word. 7 syllables? On TV, we don't have time for that. Should I call myself a German American because my ancestors came from Germany? My black friends use the word black, but most whites timidly say African American. They're afraid they might offend if they don't. But Gavin McInnes says he likes offending people. He co-founded Vice magazine, and that offended some people. And you left because it became too tame?
Possibly, yes. Maybe I became too offensive for the offenders.
You have a non-disclosure agreement. You can't tell us the full story. But what do you mean you like offending people?
I like offending people if I'm right. I like hate facts. When they have the story wrong, it's discouraging and it's even depressing. But when you say something correct, like a lot of women would be happier as housewives, and that makes steam come out of people's ear, that's fun. Saying a hate fact is fun. And it's pretty easy to do in today's day and age.
I don't see much fun about what Donald Sterling said.
Donald Sterling, just for the record, said, I don't care if you sleep with them, just don't advertise it. That's like a Broadway mogul saying, I don't care if you sleep with the dancers, don't publicize it. Now, the guy's a dirtbag. He's annoying. He's cheating on his wife. He's advertising his mistress. So he's doing exactly what he says you shouldn't do. But as Bill Maher pointed out, it hurts me to quote him, but being he used a swear word, but being a jerk is still legal in this country. And when you try to censor that, you do way more harm than good.
he said more than that, didn't he? He said things about...
I don't care if you sleep with them. It's like you said once. You said, our biggest problem is that our poor are overfed. Now our racists say you can sleep with them. These are our problems?
It makes me look bad if my girlfriend is seen with those people.
Yes. Look, we're sitting here arguing about context, and that is the dilemma you put yourself in when you create this censorship world. So I'm playing devil's advocate saying, maybe he meant, it looks like you're with my basketball players, and he's in the basketball industry. I don't know. The beauty of a libertarian philosophy is we don't have to get into these semantics. We just say, you can say things privately to your mistress, and they're none of my beeswax.
Paula Deen admits to having used the N-word. The Food Network announced they would not renew her contract.
And that's their prerogative as a private enterprise. You know, a lot of people dropped the Sterling sponsorships, Clipper sponsorships, because they would look like they were standing in solidarity of the misconception of these statements. So we create this whole black cloud of stigma when we live in a culture like this. But all it's proof of is that the way people talk quietly in private at bars has become a different universe from the public discourse. And that's not a good thing.
It ought to be a different... I mean, you ought to have some freedom privately in the bar than going on TV.
Well, why doesn't TV talk like bars? Ann Coulter, when she started at MSNBC, she didn't own a TV, so she didn't know that there's a separate language. It's almost like academia. They have a whole other third language. But Ann just talks in public the way she talks in private, and I think the majority of middle America goes, yeah, finally.
Rush Limbaugh lost some advertisers and was dropped by 2 radio stations after he implied that Sandra Fluck was a slut for demanding everybody get free birth control.
And he never called her a slut. He implied that there's a possibility of this. But because of the black cloud of stigma, the dark cloud of stigma, I don't want to say anything incorrect here, they had to do that just to go with the general consensus. And it's got nothing to do with reality.
All right, things you have written. Asians are so good with computers that if you make them mad on the internet, you better be prepared for a tsunami of terabytes in retaliation.
That's a horrible hate fact that I said. If you make fun of NASCAR, you're probably going to get 2 tweets. If you say anything controversial regarding Asians, you should buy more RAM from your computer because it might explode.
And this is a stereotype, but it's based on some truth.
The Canadian Human Rights Commission said anything can be hate speech that hurts someone, even if it's true. Now, that is profoundly un-American. Jefferson said there's no truth existing which I fear, and I was British and Canadian, and my family left those 2 countries because of that kind of stigma. We moved here for freedom, and now America is following this stupid trend of censorship.
I mean, not totally, but one more example. The owner of the Washington Redskins doesn't want to change the name of his football team. However, to curry favor with Indian victims groups, the owner founded a charity called the Redskins Original Americans Foundation. Stephen Colbert then mocked him with this joke.
I formed my own charity, the Ching Chong Ding Dong Foundation for Sensitivity to Orientals or whatever.
Of course, that's a joke, but the politically correct mafia demands he be fired.
People are calling for Stephen Colbert's show to be canceled.
The hashtag cancel Colbert is trending this morning.
Hashtag cancel Colbert went viral.
Now, he kept his job, but if he were a right-wing comedian, he'd be toast?
Oh, it'd be a totally different story. What if Magic Johnson said, you can sleep with white guys, just don't bring them to the game? He'd be called a wimp. Stephen Colbert made an unwitty joke, but he was actually mocking racist ignorance. And you can judge a culture by the way they react to ridicule. Islam has always been a great example of a culture that cannot handle ridicule and is therefore barbaric. Our raison d'etre has always been we can handle it. And now we're slipping back into this. We're going into the past. We're going back to Puritan America.
Well, not quite yet, but we are moving in some ways in that direction. Thank you. Gavin, coming up, why rude, hateful people like Gavin and I should be glad we live in America, because if we lived elsewhere, nasty things might happen to us. That's next. If you're annoyed by suffocating political correctness that discourages you from saying what you really think, take heart. It could be worse. You could live in Canada. Ezra Levant lives there. He hosts a political talk show, and he wrote a book called Shakedown. Shakedown is upside down here, Ezra, because what? The speech police held you by the ankles and shook you till they got your money? What's your point?
Well, yeah, I mean, in Canada we have all sorts of censorship laws, but they're obviously not called censorship laws because people would know to beware of them. They're called nice things like human rights commissions. Who could be against that? But they actually shake you down if you dare say things that are politically incorrect that could hurt someone's feelings. That's against the law in Canada.
And you used to publish a magazine that reprinted the Mohammed cartoons that caused riots in various parts of the world, and just discuss where do we draw the line and what happened.
Well, yeah, I mean, we published a magazine article showing what all the fuss was about, not promoting the cartoons, just saying, hey, readers, this is what these riots were about. Well, I was subject to 2 complaints filed with the Alberta Human Rights Commission claiming that I exposed a person to, quote, hatred and contempt by virtue of publishing. I mean, I was a news publisher, and for 900 days, the government of the province of Alberta investigated and interrogated me. They put 15 different bureaucrats on the case. In the end, the case was dropped, but not before I incurred massive legal fees. And there is no traditional defense of truth or fair comment. These human rights commissions are sort of hunter-killers enforcing the counterfeit human right not to be offended. They came for me, and I'm actually still entangled in lawsuits emanating from that.
They have a 99% conviction rate? I'm sorry? Because you're one of the few people who fights back.
Absolutely, and the one guy who got away, they actually appealed and won.
Now,
in Canada, if a regulator is coming for you, they have so many approaches. They can get at you through a Human Rights Commission. We have something called the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council that applies to guys like me on TV. We have our version of the FCC. We have civil courts that enforce defamation law that's tilted towards the plaintiffs. There's about 5 ways that the government tilts the law against free speech, but they're very selective about it. If you're part of a politically protected group, you can say things much rougher than, say, a conservative blowhard like me.
So if you're a liberal woman, you have more leeway?
Well, a little bit, but, you know, I think it's like a game of poker. Straight white male like me has, maybe a high card of an 8. If you're a woman, it's like a pair of 2s. If you're gay, that's 3 of a kind, but that's easily trumped. If you're a black woman, that's like, let's say, 4 of a kind. But the royal flush is if you are an immigrant Muslim. That seems to trump everything. And I'm not just being cheeky. There are radical Muslim imams in Canada who preach extremist things, literally calling for men to beat their wives, calling for death to homosexuals. These people are never prosecuted under these hate speech or Human Rights Commission complaints. Never in the history of Canada has a Muslim person been prosecuted for hate speech under the Human Rights Commissions. But a guy like me shows a Danish cartoon of Mohammed in a magazine just to tell a news story, 900 days of complaints. So it depends who you are. You can say things that other guys can't.
And a couple of weeks ago, at one Canadian university, 2 men tried to convince students that abortion and homosexuality violate God's laws. They were then arrested.
Students, this is wrong. Even like those of you who disagree with me, we are all less free because of this.
When the second man was arrested, students cheered.
I think that it was a good move on the university's behalf. The way that they were promoting it wasn't wholesome in any way, and that it was kind of hating certain groups of people, and that's not okay in Canada. Here at the U of R, we're really accepting of everybody, and they weren't.
So we're really accepting of everybody, but we're not accepting of certain speech.
That's right. I mean, what's terrifying to me as a Canadian is that we have so much censorship because we don't have a robust First Amendment like you do in the States. But worse than not having a strong constitutional protection, we don't have the same culture of defending free speech, even for people we disagree with. And that's what was terrifying to me, is students cheering censorship, someone saying we're very open-minded except for people we disagree with. We don't have that great American tradition on the left and the right of free speech, even for crude speech. And I think we have to give credit to groups like the ACLU, who in the 60s and 70s went to defend even neo-Nazis and even racists, all the way to the Supreme Court. It has to be a bipartisan thing.
Although I have to say, in America,
in my country of Canada, we don't.
In America, it's under threat, too. Thank you, Ezra Levant. You've got 50 defamation suits and complaints and lawsuits against you. Thank you for taking it to defend speech. Next, America is becoming more like Canada. There's a new commandment: thou shalt not hurt others with words. This is not a good thing. In America today, there is a new commandment: thou shalt not hurt others with words. The goal is noble: create a kinder country. But who gets to decide how much hurt is permissible? The person spoken about, the victim? This invites everyone to be a victim. And that guarantees there will be lots of victims and the censorship will never stop. Now, it's fine if the NBA or a private school or a company want to censor speech. Fox is free to fire me if they don't like what I say tonight. But it's important that government not have the power to censor. We have lots of companies and sports leagues, but just one government. And government can take our freedom. So it's crucial that Americans be free to criticize our political leaders. And we do.
You and your cronies in the government do this kind of stuff all the time.
Right. Go get them. But free speech doesn't mean that we should be able to say anything, anywhere. It is illegal to shout fire in a crowded theater. People might be trampled. I can't legally incite violence or lie about people, defame them. There are limits. But the politically correct always want more limits, which makes me wonder, would today's lawyers approve the First Amendment? I don't think so. A couple of years ago, I put that question to some law students.
Which of you believe?
At Seton Hall University in New Jersey, they graduate hundreds of future lawyers. They do discuss the importance of the First Amendment.
You have to protect freedom for the thought we hate, because otherwise you never have a society where ideas can clash with each other and come up with the best idea.
Exactly, but now students get indoctrination on hostile work environments and discrimination. So many were quick to also say the First Amendment should not apply to things like hate speech.
There's no value that comes out of hate speech.
Some people also wanted an exception for flag burning.
And we need to regulate flag burning.
Some want another exception. Blasphemy should be banned.
If you look at the gravity of the harm versus the intrinsic value, what is gained in blasphemy, the gravity of harm outweighs the intrinsic value.
This student wanted a ban on political speech by corporations.
Because that's the only speech you hear. They will own the airwaves. They will own all the advertising venues because they can afford it.
Videos about hunting.
You're comfortable with locking the people up who just made the film.
Oh, yeah.
So the Bill of Rights should say Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech except for hate speech, flag burning, blasphemy, corporate political speech, depictions of hunting and animal cruelty, and who knows what else they might have added.
I think we may have gone too far.
Right. They had. And in countries that don't have a First Amendment, they do go too far. Belgium just passed a law banning sexist speech. The penalty ranges from a month to a year in jail. This will supposedly stop sexism, but it won't. Far better that we fight bigotry with more speech, not censorship. What really convinced me that even hate speech should be tolerated is this book, Kindly Inquisitors. The author, Jonathan Rauch, is gay, but he opposes hate speech laws meant to protect gays. He says homosexuality is more accepted in America today because people have been free to say nasty things. And he reminds us that not long ago, America was so hostile to gays, this was a public service announcement.
One never knows when the homosexual is about. Let's take the case of Jimmy Barnes. What Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick, a sickness that was not visible like smallpox, but no less dangerous and contagious, a sickness of the mind. You see, Ralph was a homosexual. One never knows when the homosexual is about. He may appear normal.
That ran when I was in college. And just 20 years ago, Rausch reminds us, gay Americans were forbidden to work for government, to obtain security clearances, forbidden to serve in the military. They were arrested for making love, even in their own homes, beaten and killed on the streets, entrapped by and arrested by police for sport, laughed at and fired from their jobs. This changed in just 2 decades, he says, because there was open debate. The best way to convince people to become less bigoted is to allow all sides to speak openly. Then the argument wins. Not long ago, gays were pariahs. We had no real political power, only the force of our arguments. But in a society where free exchange was the rule, that was enough. Laws against hate speech and sexism sound reasonable, but they do more harm than good. That's our show. See you next week.